Hello, I hope this finds everyone well today. I'm trying something new. I'm going to try a little different software package to help us go through our slides this week. Anyway, I hope this is enjoyable for folks. And if you don't like it, then give me some feedback. But otherwise, hopefully this will kind of help us dive into the slideshow a little bit better, and I won't make recordings on my cell phone. So anyway, this is week 4. We're going to be discussing how attitudes affect behavior and vice versa. There will be a lot of emphasis on how behaviors actually impact our attitude or our beliefs. So let's jump into this. So first of all, I want to recall a theme from last week where we discussed about the fundamental attribution error. So do we attribute things to people because of a defective character, or do we think that people are more kind of products of what's going on around them in their environments? So, if you recall an old movie called Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, where they kind of have this bet for $1 that they can kind of socially engineer each one of those people is kind of, an illustration of more of an understanding of an external uh, situational attribution. So this slide discusses that internal dispositional versus external situational attribution. So where are you? Ask yourself at this point, do you have a little bit more, is it more people, their character, what determines who they are? Is it 50-50? Is it over here? Is it half and half dispositional, situational? Do you have a lot of, depending on how you view people, is it a lot their character? Is it just that's who they are? Versus is it mostly environment? Is it mostly situational that determines, who a person is? So again, want you to understand that fundamental attribution error that's important going forward. And I'm going to go ahead and circle back. We had a discussion a couple of weeks ago on kind of showing you the differences in thought for folks in India and individualistic versus collectivistic society. And so in India, there are diverse religious practices. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to lump all of India into this one box. However, in studying some aspects of Hindu, people are encouraged to live a certain way by their dharma. They, through their actions, accumulate karma, and especially, there can be some harmful karma when you're doing things that you're not supposed to, according to your life's mission, what's set out for you in your dharma. Really kind of have some parallels to our concept of heaven and hell. And so we're not going to go into the ACE study. If you haven't me in another class, we will. But that's not really going to be something that we talk about here. So one of the things that is interesting to think about is, why don't people that are having difficulty making it in India, why don't they just strike if they're a member of this lower caste? And really it goes a lot along with their internal belief system. So again, as far as an internal belief might go, if I question, I will incur bad karma, ensuring punishment for me and my offspring and my future lives, because again they believe in reincarnation in Hinduism. So here would be a thought: if I fail to conform, I will not be living up to my dharma, creating bad karma. That's going to create some internal strife, some emotional problems as well, fear, anxiety, and also some drive to live up to what you're ascribed to be in life. And these would be the resultant behaviors down here: conforming behavior, fulfilling one's prescribed role in society, like cleaning waste, not manufacturing salt, etc. So the salt reference comes in with Gandhi. But anyway, but you also want to look at these things over here. So we're going to really pay attention to these things in this circle here today, for the things like religious practices, family norms, or the bigger culture, social norms, laws, gender roles, economy, economic structure, bigger influences like what's going on in the world, educational influences. You can add countless more. Um, but all these influences serve to support somebody, conforming to these ideals. So there's something called population attributable risk, and what that is trying to put a number, an understanding, a statistical understanding on the effective environment. In other words, all those things on this side that are not part of a person, they're an external influence. What, how much of that can you attribute? Again, back to this attribution wheel. How much do we want to attribute to, a person's situation versus their internal character? So there's a researcher used a clinical sample to assess the relationship between several adverse childhood experiences and illicit drug use, and found that 50% of lifetime drug problems, 63% of illicit drug addiction, and 64% of IV drug use was attributable to having at least one adverse childhood event. And so this would be a trauma in childhood. So you can see it's very predictive. Things that happen really negatively in a person's childhood can have an impact. And so you think, well, that wasn't necessarily a character trait that they, were born with, but something that happened to them that impacted them as they were growing up. So the difficulty with this is putting a percentage risk. Is it's like predicting the next at bat for a baseball player. A baseball player could be hitting really well at about 350. Every third at bat, they're getting on base. They're getting a hit, and so it's much like that where you can't really necessarily predict every person every at bat, but you can say, well, there's this chance that this is going to happen. There's about a 35% chance. So that's what it's saying. So there's some difficulty with prediction. It's not 100% certain, but there is a percentage chance. So in other words, if you look at the influences of child trauma, oops, let me go back. If you look at some of these external influences, some of these situational influences on IV drug use, you see that child trauma has a large portion of that wheel, and so you can also see that family influence has a big part of that. Access to drugs, social influences over here, genetics from their ancestors, even epigenetics, cravings, and then you have internal attitudes over here. So this is really kind of where our statistics and our data are taking us and understanding even, IV drug use. If you take a person that has zero negative events in their childhood, not experienced any real negative traumas, versus somebody that's had 4 or more really significantly negative experiences in their childhood, there's a 1,300% increased risk of becoming an IV drug user for somebody that has had 4 or more really adverse childhood experiences. So keep that in mind. When you look at somebody, when you say, well, why don't they just stop using it? It's all on them. But keep that in mind. We haven't walked in everybody's shoes. We don't know what other people have gone through. So I think that's one of the big things I want us to get out of this class. But I also want you to get this concept right here, which is look at all these influences: child trauma, social influences, family influences, access to drugs, natural environment, genetics from ancestors, cravings, epigenetics, internal attitudes, belief, and thought processes. That one would actually go in here. Would actually go in the individual. Think about all of the different things that are going into determining somebody's fate. So one of the biggest cognitive developments, one of the biggest points of brain growth that people experience from high school past college is recognizing and understanding that things are usually not determined by just one thing, or even two factors, but there are countless influences that go into determining people's situations. And for that matter, just phenomenon in general. Just our lives are complex, and there's a lot of things that go into them. There's not just one or two causal factors. So if you get anything from this class, I would hope that that would stand out to you. So I'll go ahead and move in with the next recording into our actual chapter.